Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hi everyone, we are from Group 3. Today we are going to present our presentation with the topic is about content analysis. As you know, the member of our group are Risma, me, and then Rosi Hertanto, Wafiq Fadylla N, Puji Ana. Well, let's check this out. The first point that I'm going to explain to you is about the definition of content analysis. Content analysis is a research method that applies to written or visual materials for the purpose of identifying specified characteristics of the materials. That's the definition of content analysis. And also, content analysis is a technique that enables researchers to study human behavior in an indirect way by analyzing communication. And the materials that can be analyzed are textbook, newspaper, web page, television programs, speech, essays, advertisement, novel, magazine, musical composition, and other type of document. Observation and interview data. And also, content analysis can be used to supplement other, more direct methods of research. Attitudes toward women who are working in so-called men's occupation. I'll give you an example. The example can be investigated in variety of ways, such as questionnaires, in-depth interviews, and then participant observation, or content analysis of magazine articles. It can be television programs, also newspaper, films, autobiographies that touch on the subject. Then, content analysis can be used to give researchers insight into problems that they can then test by more direct method. I think this is positive point of content analysis. And also, a researcher may analyze the content of student newspaper. I'll give you an example. To obtain information for devising questionnaires or formulating questions for subsequent in-depth interview with number of the student body at a particular high school. That's the example. And then the second point that I will explain is about how does content analysis works. Content analysis start with a sample of the text, or it can be called as the unit. Defines the units of analysis as such as words or sentences, and the categories to be used for analysis reviews the text in order to call them and place them into categories, and then counts and log the occurrences of word, codes, and categories. From statistical analysis and quantitative methods are applied, leading to an interpretation of the result. Put simply, content analysis involves coding, categorizing. Categorizing means creating meaningful categories into which the units of analysis. It can be word, phrase, sentence, or others that can be placed. And also comparing. Comparing here means categorize and making links between them. And the last one is concluding. It means drawing theoretical conclusion from the text. And the third point that I will explain, that I will share, is about applications of content analysis. From our work, we got 7 applications of content analysis. And they are, the first one is describe trends in schooling over time. That's the first application. Describes trends in schooling over time, such as the back to basic movement, by examining professional or general publications. And then the second is understand organizational patterns, such as by examining chart, outlines, and prepared by school administrators. And then the third is about show how different schools handle the same phenomena differently, such as curricular patterns and school governance. And the fourth is infer attitudes, values, and culture patterns in different countries, such as through an examination of what sorts of search and activities are or are not sponsored or endorsed. And then the fifth is about comparing the myths that people hold about school with what actually occurs within them, such as by comparing the result of polls taken of the general public with literature written by teachers and others working in the school. And the sixth is gain a sense of how teachers feel about their work, such as examining what they have written about their jobs. And the last one is gain some idea of how schools are perceived, such as by viewing films or television programs depicting the same. Okay, and then the next point will be explained by my partner.
I would continue the presentation about categorization in content analysis. All procedures that are called content analysis have certain characteristics in common. These procedures also vary in some respects depending on the purpose of the analysis and the type of communication being analyzed. There are 2 ways that this might be done. Number 1, the researcher determines the categories before any analysis begins. These categories are based on previous knowledge, theory, and or experience. For example, later in this chapter, we use predetermined categories to describe and evaluate a series of journal articles pertaining to social studies education. Number 2, the researcher becomes very familiar with the descriptive information collected and allows the categories to emerge as the analysis continues. Steps involved in content analysis. The steps involved in a content analysis, they are: number 1, specifying the phenomenon to be investigated, such as gender, role, stereotyping. Number 2, selecting the media from which the observations are to be made, such as the Caldecott medals, books for specified time periods. Number 3. Formulating exhaustive and mutually exclusive coding categories so that the verbal or symbolic content can be counted, such as the categories steps involved in content analysis. The steps involved in a content analysis, they are: number 1, specifying the phenomenon to be investigated, such as gender role stereotyping. Number 2, selecting the media from which the observations are to be made, such as the Caldecott medals, books for specified time periods. Number 3, formulating exhaustive and mutually exclusive coding categories so that the verbal or symbolic content can be counted, such as the categories in which gender role stereotyping could occur. Number 4, deciding on the sampling plan to be used in order to obtain a representative sample of the documents, such as the sample consisting of all the Caldecott winners for 2-year periods. You might decide to look at 3 issues per week of a newspaper over a period of 1 year. For instance, or every issue of a weekly news magazine for 1 year. Number 5, training the coders so that they can consistently apply the coding scheme that has been developed and thus contribute to the reliability of the content analysis. Some coding is not so straightforward, but may require inferences about whether a minority group, for example, is being portrayed positively or negatively. Several coders should be able to code the documents using the same and obtain consistent results. If the iterator reliability is satisfactory, you can proceed to the next step. If it is less than satisfactory, the coders may be useful in revising the category definitions to make them clearer and more complete. Number 6, analyzing the data, which may involve just the frequencies and percentage in the various categories, or may involve more descriptive accounts. Coding category. In doing a content analysis, a researcher can code either or both the manifest and the latent content of a communication. Number 1, manifest content. The manifest content of a communication refers to the obvious surface content, the words, pictures, image, and so on. They are directly accessible to the naked eye or ear. No inferences as to underlying meaning are necessary. To determine, for example, whether a course of study encourages the development of critical thinking skills, a researcher might simply count the number of times the word thinking appears in the course objectives listed in the course outline. Coding the manifest content of a document has the advantage of ease of coding and reliability. Another researcher is likely to arrive at the same number of words or phrases counted. It also lets the reader of the report know exactly how the term thinking was measured. On the other hand, it would be somewhat suspect in terms of validity. Just counting the number of times the word thinking appears in the outline for a course would not indicate all the ways in which this skill is to be developed, nor would it necessarily indicate critical thinking. Number 2, latent content. The latent content of a document, on the other hand, refers to the meaning underlying what is said or shown. To get at the underlying meaning of a course outline, for example, a researcher might read through the entire outline or a sample of page, particularly thus describing the classroom activities and homework assignments to which students will be exposed. The researcher would then make an overall assessment as to the degree to which the course is likely to develop critical thinking. Although the researcher's assessment would surely be influenced by the appearance of the word thinking in the document, it would not depend totally on the frequency with which the word or its synonyms appeared. Coding the latent content of a document has the advantage of getting at the underlying meaning of what is written or shown, but it comes at some cost in reliability. It is likely that two researchers would assess differently the degree to which a particular course outline is likely to develop critical thinking. An activity or assignment judged by one researcher as especially likely to encourage critical thinking might be seen by a second researcher as ineffective.
I would continue the presentation about reliability and validity as applied to content analysis. Number 1. Reliability in content analysis is commonly checked by comparing the result of two independent courses or categories. Number 2. Validity can be checked by comparing data of time from manifest contents to that obtained from latent content. The next is data analysis. A common way to interpret content analysis data is by using frequency, the number of specific incidents found in the data and proportion of particular occurrences to total occurrences. You will note that we use this statistic in the analysis of social study research articles that follow. In content analysis study designed to explore relationship, a cross-break-table or C-square analysis is often used because both are appropriate to the analysis of the categorical data. Another method is to use coding to develop time to plasmid synthesis. Computer analysis is extremely useful in coding data once categories have been determined. It can also be useful at times in develop such categories. The next, computer use in content analysis. This can be used to do the following. Number 1, store and check data. Number 2, collect and segment data and to make numerous copies of data. Number 3, enable memorizing to take place together with detail of the circumstances in which the memorizing were written. Number 4, conduct a search for words or phrases in the data and to retrieve text. Number 5, attach identification labels to units of text or questionnaire responses so that subsequent sorting can be undertaken. And the next, note and append text. The next, partition data into units that have been determined either by the research or in response to the natural language itself. And the next, enable preliminary counting of data to be undertaken. And the next, sort, research, collect, classify, and reclassify piece of data to facilitate constant comparison and to refine schemas of classification. The next, code memos and bring them into the same schema of classification. The next, assemble, reassemble, and recall data into categories. And the next, undertake frequency counts or word paraphrase and code. And the next, cross-check data to see if they can be coded into more than one category, enabling link between categories to be discovered. And the next, establish the incidence of data that are contained in more than one category. The next, retrieve, code, and note data segment from subset in order to compare and contrast data. The next, search for piece of data that appear in a certain sequence. And the next, establish a link between counting category. The next, display relationship of category or here or the example here hierarchical, temporal, relational, subsumptive, superordinate. And the last, quote data in the final report.
My name is Puji Ana Astutik, and I'm going to continue the material. It is the advantage of content analysis. Number 1, a major advantage of content analysis is that it's unobtrusive. A researcher can observe without being observed, since the content being analyzed are not influenced by the research presence. So, ini terjadi karena konten yang dianalisis tidak dipengaruhi oleh kehadiran si peneliti. And then number 2 is that, as we have illustrated, it is extremely useful as a means of analyzing interview and observation data. So, content analysis ini sangat berguna sebagai alat untuk menganalisis wawancara dan data observasi. And then, content analysis is that the researcher can delve into records and documents to get some feel of the social life of an earlier time. He or she is not limited by time and space to the study of present event. So, peneliti dapat menyelidiki catatan-catatan atau dokumen untuk mengetahui kehidupan sosial di masa lalu. Dia tidak dibatasi oleh waktu dan ruang untuk mempelajari kejadian-kejadian saat ini saja. And then next, accrues from the fact that the logistics of content analysis are often relatively simple and economical with regard to both time and resource as compared to other research method. So, content analysis ini bisa dibilang sederhana dan ekonomis, seperti itu. And then the last, because the data are readily available and almost always can be returned to if necessary or desired, content analysis permits replication of a study by other researchers. And then the last topic is the disadvantage of content analysis. Kelemahan utama dari content analysis. Number 1, a major disadvantage of content analysis is that it is usually limited to record information. Although the researchers may, of course, arrange the recordings, as in the use of open-ended questionnaire or projective techniques. One would not be likely to use such recording to study such variables as proficiency in calculus or the frequency of hostile act, because they require demonstrate behavior or skill. And then number 2, the other main disadvantage is in establishing validity. Assuming that different analyses can achieve acceptable agreement in categorizing, the question remains as to the true meaning of the categories themselves. And then the last, sometimes there is a temptation among researchers to consider that the interpretation gleaned from a particular content analysis indicate the cause of a phenomenon rather than being a reflection of it. So sometimes ada godaan di antara peneliti untuk menganggap bahwa interpretasi yang diperoleh dari analisis dari konten analisis ini menunjukkan penyebab suatu fenomena daripada menjadi cerminannya. Well, that was the presentation from Group 3 about content analysis. Thank you for your nice attention. And wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.